Welcome, everybody. I'm Pete Marsh. I'm one of the co-chairs of USGBC California's volunteer-driven Building Decarb Committee. My co-chair, Alex Authy, is on with us. And then our wonderful staff from USGBC California, Kim and Kayla, hello. We won't try to do introductions of all of the USGBC members. In a minute, I'd love to ask the Air District staff to introduce themselves. But before we do that, just a very brief overview on why we've invited them to join us today and why I think that's so important. The South Coast Air Quality Management District has been for over a year and a half working on development of two proposed rules or amendments to longstanding rules. And these would essentially phase out the emissions from our space heating and water heating appliances in the most cost-effective and equitable fashion possible. The rules allow these devices to continue operating as long as the equipment operates, but when it dies, replace it with a non-emitting machine. That could be a machine that burns gas or some other fuel, but it would have to have some kind of a scrubber or whatever to mitigate all the emissions. The primary pollutant being addressed in these rules is NOx, but co-benefits include most of the other criteria, pollutants and greenhouse gases. So one of the reasons it's super important is there's a lot of debate and discussion, especially about affordability. And I think that our community here, the professionals in U.S. Green Building Council, have really good insights to the details of affordability at the individual household level. And I'd love everyone to just listen carefully to the presentation, think about at every point, gee, what are the costs of recapitalizing equipment, operating costs? What are the things we know from different experiences we've had as architects and engineers and green building professionals around the state, and that can help inform the discussion and debate. I think that's probably good for introduction. I hope I didn't butcher anything too badly there, and Heather, you all will correct me if I did. But with that, I'll hand it over to the South Coast Air District team. And again, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. And maybe we can go through quick introductions first. We're all going to take a couple of the slides, but I will start off the discussion. And my name is Heather Farr. I'm a planning and rules manager overseeing these two rule developments. We're going to talk about the proposed rules as well as our proposed, actually not proposed anymore, incentive program that will be coming first quarter this year. So I will start the presentation and then I'll pass it on to my team. But as far as introductions, I'll pass it over to Yangrun.
Yaron Zhu, program supervisor for the team, and we have several team members here working on the building appliances rules and also Go Zero incentive program. And we have Peter Campbell working on Rule 11, but he's off recently. It's a paternity leave and spending some time with the baby. And so Jen is leading 1121 for water heater, and she'll be also helping to take up Peter's Rule 1111. And I also have Emily here. I will let them introduce themselves. Jen?
Yep, I think Yanrong did a great introduction of me, but Jen Vin, air quality specialist, working on both amendments for rules 1111 and 1121, and working closely with Emily.
Hi, Emily Ann, air quality specialist, assisting Jen and Peter. I'm also working on the Go Zero pilot incentive program, which we'll talk about in the presentation. Previously worked on another zero emission rule for commercial water heating. Thanks, Heather.
Okay, so I'll walk through the first couple of slides just to provide a little bit of background. So next slide, please, Jen. First of all, just wanted to talk about who we are. So we are the South Coast Air Quality Management District. We are the agency responsible for the air quality of the 4-county region, that is LA, Orange, San Bernardino, and Riverside counties. There are 17 million people who reside within our jurisdiction who have, unfortunately, the worst air quality in the nation. Our air quality has a lot to do with the sunny Southern California climate that we all enjoy, as well as the topography with the mountains that go around our jurisdiction. It just leads to what we call an inversion layer. The air just cannot mix. The air just gets trapped, and lots of industry as well as lots of cars and trucks. So that pollution gets the heat from the sun acts upon it, and it really creates our summertime smog as well as our PM emissions that are high in the wintertime. And these, poor air quality have real impacts. They have impacts on human life, including an estimated 1,500 premature deaths every year that comes from this high pollution that we have. And we do have federal obligations to meet air quality standards. So we do have to reduce emissions in order to lower those PM and ozone emissions. And if we don't attain them, there are real consequences, including things like loss of highway funding and a potential federal takeover of air quality planning. So these are real bad consequences if we don't hit our goals. So we have to do everything we can to lower emission in order to reach those goals. And for South Coast, we are the regional air quality agency. We regulate the stationary as well as the area sources with limited authority over mobile source. That really comes from the state and the federal. So what we do is we control the emissions from the industry that is within our jurisdiction. Next slide, please. So just more way of background. When it comes to our air quality, the biggest driver right now is NOx, these oxides of nitrogen. They come from incomplete combustion. Think of the cars, the trucks, but it also comes a large part from building appliances. So the water heating and space heating equipment in all of the buildings within our jurisdiction. And we have these upcoming goals that I mentioned, these federal air quality goals that must be met. And those standards are coming soon. Those deadlines are coming soon. I worked at the agency for a long time, and it's those deadlines, those targets used to be really pretty far out. Right now, they're really right around the corner with deadlines in 2031 and 2037. And from our last air quality management plan, so every 4 to 5 years, we do this large planning exercise where we look at all the emissions throughout our jurisdiction to determine how many emissions we have to reduce in order to really meet those standards. And based on the 2022 AQMP and all that modeling work, we need to reduce over 67% of NOx emissions in order to meet the 2037 deadline. And that represents 124 ton per day NOx emission reduction. So it's a huge amount of reductions that we have to get. So we have to look everywhere that's feasible to try to achieve these emission reductions for all sources, from all different industries. So from refineries to energy generating facilities, all the way down to the water heaters and space heaters and all of the individual residents throughout our jurisdiction. Next slide, please. Okay, I think I'm going to pass it over to Jen to start talking about what we're doing specifically in our proposed rule amendments for Rule 1111, which is space heating, and 1121, which is water heating.
Yep. Thank you, Heather. Yeah, as Heather mentioned, we're looking to reduce those emissions wherever feasible, and we see these in our building appliances rules as well as our incentive program. So we'll talk about those since this is sort of a package deal. So we have proposed amended Rule 1111, which is what we're calling our residential and light commercial space heating, and proposed amended Rule 1121, which is our residential water heating. And going along with that is our Go Zero incentive program, which Emily will talk about later, but just got approval for that to launch early in 2025. So really exciting. So for 1111 and 1121, as Pete mentioned earlier, this process has been initiated since September 2023. So it's been going on for over a year now. We're hoping to get board adoption consideration by May 2nd. We'll talk more about the details of the rule in later slides, but as Pete mentioned earlier, these rules apply when at the end of the useful life of these equipment. So you can continue using these past that compliance dates. And once those things break down, then you would need to change into a zero emission appliance. So going back, why regulate space and water heating? Residential space and water heating has been regulated since 1978, which is early on as to when the AQMD was formed. So these proposed rules will cover 10 million units emitting about 10 tons per day of NOx emissions. So those 10 million units would be 5 million for 1111 and 5 million for 1121, meaning 5 million residents. Comparatively, by 2037, all utilities emit about 2 to 3 tons per day of NOx emissions, and all refineries at 4, and passenger vehicles at 7. So really, this 10-ton per day from building appliances is a big reduction of NOx emissions. This would be the largest emission reduction achieved by our rules, which was that 7 ton per day for that refinery rule. So that 10 tons per day is 17% of all stationary sources, which is what we have regulatory authority over. And we're required by law to take all feasible measures to meet these air quality standards. So zero emission technologies are currently commercially available and proven to work, which is why we're looking to amend this rule. And we've worked on this before with our clean air furnace program, and this assisted about 2,500 homes to transition to these zero emission technologies. So just to give you an idea of what zero emission technologies there are out there, there's quite a few, but heat pumps are the most common zero emission technology. These have been available for quite a long time. And really the technology is using a refrigeration cycle to move heat in or out of a room. So it's kind of like a refrigerator, to move it in or out. Heat pumps also be used to provide hot water, which are heat pump water heaters, which we would use in our residential water heating rule. And these heat pumps run on electricity, which means they produce zero NOx at the point of use. Other technologies include things like electric resistance. So that's something like a conventional electric heater where it uses a coil. Also solar, as well as fuel cells. So just to remind everyone that these rules are technology neutral, so you would just have to meet the zero emissions. But for the purposes of this presentation, we'll talk about the most common zero emission technology, which are those heat pumps. So there are plenty of concerns regarding zero emission technologies. So one of the concerns is technologies emerging and lack of consumer demand. So heat pumps, fuel cells, and solar are proven technologies. More heat pumps than gas furnaces were sold in the US since 2021, and over 49,000 heat pumps were installed through Tech Clean California program. So this is really going out there, and really if you have an understanding of what a heat pump looks like, once you're out in public, you kind of just spot them everywhere. Like you'll see them just like in a mall, or I just see them everywhere. So there's that. Also, high implementation costs, so HVAC systems costs comparable to that heat pump. And there's also federal, state, and local incentives to offset those upfront costs. And with natural turnover and extended implementation time to allow for proper planning, this really allows people to understand what the rules are, what technology is out there, and really allow that technology to develop. And future market adoption and competition will also drive down that cost. And with efficiency gains, you get cost savings over time with utilities. Also, another concern with minimal air quality benefits, as we said earlier, 10 tons per day is a big deal, being 17% of those stationary source NOx emissions. AQMD requires about 22 tons per day NOx emission reductions from stationary sources by 2037. And lastly, another concern with the increase in electricity demand, California is projected to add more electricity generation in that demand, and new and emerging technologies are less likely to require things like a panel upgrade. that being like a 120-volt heat pump water heater. You can really just plug it into that existing outlet that you have for a gas-fired water heater. Also, local utility mapping service area to determine where upgrades are needed. So for the compliance schedule for both rules, you can kind of orient yourselves with this table on the side. So we split 1111, which is our furnace rule. So for commercial and residential furnaces, for new buildings, they're all requiring 2026 because of the 2025 Title 24 building code, which requires that standard for 2026 new builds. So this is all across the board, 2026 for new buildings. For existing buildings, residential and commercial furnaces would be at 2029, and then for mobile home furnaces, 2030. So again, this is at the end of useful life. So if you do have a gas-fired furnace past that 2029, you can still continue to use it until it breaks. So for that, the natural turnover is about 4 to 7% per year. And then for 1121, same thing for residential water heaters and mobile home water heaters, new buildings requiring that 2026 date. And then for existing buildings, 2029, and then 2030 for residential and mobile home water heaters, respectively. We're also considering alternative compliance options to address some issues. So stranded asset of a newer AC unit, we're thinking if you have an AC unit that is less than a certain age, you're given an alternative compliance option for that. So maybe a later compliance date. These are things that we're really thinking about right now with our rulemaking process. And then for multifamily building owners to allow them to have temporary units during transition, really see multifamily buildings as an issue. If you have so many units, you really have to have an inventory for backup. And then also installations at high altitudes. Sorry, I think there is a question in the chat.
I was just typing an answer to that question.
Okay.
So yeah,
Okay.
the question is if the South Coast regulates ozone and if there's a connection between ozone and NOx. So ozone is considered a secondary pollutant. It's actually formed from emissions, from NOx emissions and VOC emissions. As I mentioned in the beginning, as the sunlight reacts on those chemicals, that's when ozone is formed. So by reducing NOx emissions, that's how we also are able to reduce ozone emissions. I see Jed also provided a good response to that. Thank you, Jed.
Awesome. Oh, let me go back. Sorry, thank you for that. Hopefully that answers that question. But yeah, high altitude regions, we see that as an issue with like electricity availability as well as installation costs for that. So really giving alternative compliance options for that. So it's really just an overview of what the rules are. We're more than happy to go into more depth if anyone has any more questions or want to schedule a meeting with us at any time. But for now, I'll pass it over to Emily to talk about Go Zero.
So in addition to, the rules, the regulations that we're working on, we also recognize that funding and incentives can play a major role in helping advance the transition for different groups of people. And so, we've already had a previous program. It was our Clean Air Furnace Rebate Program. We did have a phase of that program focused on heat pumps, and we found a lot of success with that program. So what we're trying to do with this new iteration, which is called Go Zero, is we're expanding on our old program. We're adding in a lot of new elements, and we want to really focus on the areas where we think need a lot of attention. So we're going to have rebates for single family, and now we're adding also multifamily and small businesses to the mix. We're also including a new element of installer training to help with that workforce development portion. And we're also allocating money for application assistance. This not only is going to serve as like a concierge service for helping people with our own application process, but we also envision this as a tool for people to see what other incentives are out there and could potentially be stacked or layered with our Go Zero incentives to really maximize the benefit that they can get from the available funding out there right now. We're also going to have a lot of outreach focus in this program because we really want to make sure that we can reach those disadvantaged and overburdened communities so that they're aware that there's funding available and that there's opportunity here. So our pilot phase is going to be funded by 21 million. We anticipate that there will be future phases of this program, and there may be funding up to 5-fold, but that is all in the future for us to see how well this first pilot program operates. We do have rebate amounts, including higher amounts for those who are living in overburdened communities. And we determine overburdened communities by looking at CalEnviroscreen, and we're also considering other methods such as looking at folks who are enrolled in certain utility discount programs. We do hope to launch this early this year. So we recently got our approval from the board to have the contractors that we selected actually execute this program. So we are working on the contract process right now, and we hope to launch the program soon and have that website running and have all the information out there so that people can start applying for those rebates. Next slide, please. In terms of incentive amounts, for single family, it'll be between 1,000 to 3,000. This will depend on if you're looking to get a heat pump for space heating or a heat pump for water heating, and if you lived in an overburdened community. For multifamily rebates, the range is between 1,000 to 4,000 per equipment unit. And so that'll also depend on what type of situation this heat pump is replacing, what previous, equipment was there operating. So that'll all be listed more clearly on our website once we get that launched. We are going to have a cap for apartment buildings of likely 300K. Of course, this information is all subject to change as we are working on the details with our contractors right now. But we do want to institute a cap because we anticipate there may be a reservation system for the multifamily rebate portions. And we do want to make sure that different entities are able to make use of our funding. So we want to make sure that we can have that reservation and that cap system in place. For small business rebates, it will be $4,000 per unit. We do have more information on that upcoming, how small businesses can also participate in our program. Next slide, please. In terms of the other portions of our program, the installer training is going to familiarize installers with the different elements of installing a heat pump, such as the HVAC, electrical work. And we also want to make sure that we have different depths of experience and different modes of participation. So we may have some virtual, some in person. When we selected our contractor for this element, they did anticipate training over 700 contractors as part of this program. So we're really hoping we can reach a lot of people in a lot of different ways. So we're excited for this portion of the program. For application assistance, again, we are going to focus a lot of outreach on our overburdened communities as well, so that they're aware of the funding. And we're also going to spread out a thorough outreach in all 4 of our counties. We want to make sure that all of our counties are participating in our program, and we want to have specific outreach materials in different languages and in different ways and methods of reaching people so that we can spread the word. And of course, we're always happy to have our the people that are interested in this program to spread word of mouth as well. Is always super helpful for us because we really want to focus on the outreach portion. Next slide, please. It's not just our program out there right now. There's a lot of funding available through different levels, such as federal, state, local utility, etc. One that recently launched was HERA. This is funding from the federal IRA level, and it's being administered by the state energy commission. And this is going to provide households based on income between 4,000 to 8,000 for each unit. And this can actually help a lot of folks who are thinking about that price differential between the capital cost of a gas unit versus the capital cost of a heat pump. If you're looking at that extra incremental cost of, say, your unit breaks down, you would have originally replaced with the gas unit, but now you're going to be replacing with an electric unit. What's that extra cost that you're going to pay for the electric? A lot of these fundings stacked together can bridge that or even exceed that cost. And HERA is going to be a really big step towards that, especially for those who are lower income. Federal tax credits are also available. So this is separate. So instead of a rebate, this is a tax credit, and you can get up to $2,000 for a heat pump. And actually, the way that it is created right now is that you can get that $2,000 each year that you apply, as long as your unit was, installed in that year. So you can get, a different unit for different years and really make the most use of those tax credits. There's also a state program, Tech Clean California. This provides $1,500 for heat pump HVAC. They also have other rebates in the mix or upcoming for other equipment types, other situations. That can all be found on their website, and they have quite a bit of funding there as well. There are other state programs. Comfortably California provides incentives for heat pump HVAC, and Golden State Rebates focuses on the heat pump water heating side. And in addition, there's also local and utility incentives. If you look at the website Switches On, which is linked in this presentation, and you can find a web page where you select the type of rebates that you're interested in. You can even input your location, and it will really help you narrow down what sort of rebates are available in your area. That said, there is a lot of funding out there, so this might not be the only place to find that information. And we hope that our application assistance portion of the program is going to help people more directly with their questions. And we have an example here on the slide of what sort of incentive stacking might be available in different situations. And it can be, for example, up to $9,000 of incentives, depending on your income. And if you're more income qualified, it may be up to $14,500. And that's not including those like local utility incentives that may be out there. So there truly is a lot of funding right now. We really hope that people will consider to use these funding sources if they are transitioning to electric or zero emission equipment. Next slide, please. And I'll pass this on to Yenron to talk about our outreach efforts.
Thank you, Emily. So for our rulemaking, typically we have public outreach through newsletter and also physical mails, and we also post notice on like public workshop notice, a public hearing notice. All newsletters cover all 4 counties, and for this rulemaking, we actually have expanded the outreach effort. And you see this flyer on the right side, and this is a new flyer we developed and is put in on our website if you go to our rulemaking website. And we are also attending meetings and trying to increase public awareness. We have attended several COG meetings, councils of government, and we have several other COG meetings that we're scheduling. And we're attending your meeting, trying to provide information to you. And we have also attended many other meetings by other organizations. So we have also increased social media notification. If you check our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and all other social medias, and you will see publications for our rulemaking. We also have included more stakeholders and public in our newsletter. If you want to sign up our newsletter later, on a later slide, there's a link that you can sign up to receive notification. So Emily just talked about Go Zero. For the Go Zero, we have one sub-project that we will have actually 2 contractors working on public outreach and also public assistance. And through that, we hope that we can further increase the public awareness for our rules as well. Next slide, please. So here are the next steps. For Rule 1111 and 1121, we are working on scheduling the next working group meeting. That's the 8th working group meeting, and it's expected for late January or early February. So I highly encourage you to attend our working group meeting, because there will provide so much more details on our staff analysis and also proposal. And right now we are working on the presentation. It is 70, 80 slides that long. So you are going to expect a lot of detailed discussion. And we also welcome any comment and the working group meeting. That is the chance that we work together for the analysis and also a feasible proposal. So in the next working group meeting, we're going to show our refined analysis. And we want to gather more comments to also refine our proposal. So with that, and we may update the Station Resource Committee in February, and then we have public hearing on May. That it was scheduled on April, but postponed to May and last Friday's board meeting. So we are committed to have technology check-in and before the zero emission effective date. For Go Zero, Emily just mentioned that we're going to launch the program in early 2025. Right now, we're meeting with the selected contractors to work on the contracts and then the details of the program. Next slide, please. So here are some links. The sign up, you can check this. If you want to receive our notification for the rules for Rule 1111 and 1121, there are several checkbox actually you can check. One is building appliances. You're not going to miss out any notification if you check that one. We also have the checkbox for Rule 1111 and for Rule 1121 and Go Zero incentive program checkbox. So we send notification to any stakeholders or public that sign up for those boxes. So you are also encouraged to check out our website for the building appliances rules. And we have previous presentation and also preliminary draft staff report uploaded there. And we even have we also have the Go Zero web page there through that link too. And so if you have any question, feel free to reach out. We have the contacts here, and you can reach out. You can contact anyone, and then we are a team, and we're going to together provide the best response that you need. Thank you.
Jen, could you go back a few slides? We had a question in the chat on when the February SSC was. We had that date listed here somewhere. There you go. February 21st, 2025 is the date of our next Stationary Source Committee, where we're going to present kind of an update to, what's happened since the last time we talked to SSC, which was just this past December 20th. And while we're on this slide, I just want to talk about our technology check-in a little bit as well. And we do these frequently with rules. We do them a lot of times when we're doing technology forcing rules. In this case, we don't view this as technology forcing. This technology is out there and exists today. However, there are lots of, concerns on affordability and costs and, if our projections are going to come to fruition. So the idea is we're going to set these future effective limits in the future, allow time for the technology to mature, and then we will do like a reassessment. We won't necessarily change the rules if we find that things aren't as we predicted. We could suggest some changes or some modifications, but the idea is we'll look at the technology, the costs, see how really the implementation is going, report back to our committee, and at that time make a decision if we want to make any changes. With that, though, I think we are through our presentation if anybody has any questions.
So Heather, there's a question in the chat, and so it's regarding CC if they respond to our rule. So first of all, I can respond this first, and then Heather, if you have more to add, or our team has more to add. And so we recognize different government, they have rules that for the same kind of equipment. CEC, their emphasis is more for the energy, and so they normally our regulation is more stringent. However, we are regulating different things. We are regulating NOx emissions, air pollutants, and then they regulate energy efficiency. But it could be end up to the same kind of practice. And so when and ARB actually, they are also working on building appliances rules. But however, their rule will cover the whole California. So they may not be as stringent, or they may not have more provisions as we do, or they could have more stringent. So when two rules are regulating the same population, and then the most stringent requirement will apply. So that's the practice of the rule for the same kind of equipment.
And for our region, since we have the worst air quality in the region, if another jurisdiction, say CARB or Bay Area, were to adopt something that's more stringent, then we would have to, we can be more stringent, we can't be less stringent. So say California Air Resources Board came up with something that was more stringent than what we were proposing, we would have to make some changes to our rule. So California is broken into like 35 different air districts that have their own air pollution control district, or AQMD, that sets the local regulations. And that was really designed because not all areas of California have the same air quality issues. That's why South Coast tends to push things a little lower and go a little faster when it comes to the regulations. It's just because we are extreme non-compliance.
Go ahead, Ryan. Can't hear you. I saw you unmute.
Is it working now?
There you go. Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your presentation. I'm with the city of Encinitas, so just outside of South Coast AQMD. And I kind of am seeing this as like a potential for, building decarbonization, and as a local government to adopt something similar as a REACH code. But as you might be aware, the City of Berkeley ruling, which found that, restricting appliances and natural gas consumption on an appliance basis was found to preempt the EPCA or some act similar to that. So I was wondering, and you said earlier how you've been given authority by law to, do any means necessary to reduce emissions as an air quality management district. So yeah, I'm just kind of wondering, like, the mechanism that you're using to restrict these appliances. Is it EPCA or is it the Clean Air Act? And do you possibly see like local governments being able to model this NOx emissions rule?
Great question. So we do get our authority from the Clean Air Act, and as I can't remember, I think Jen mentioned this rule 1111, these rules 1111, 1121, they have been in effect since 1978. And we have periodically over time, as technology improves, been able to lower NOx emissions. So we have the authority to establish NOx emission limits. The only difference now is we're establishing a standard of zero, is a zero NOx emission. We are technology neutral, so any way you can achieve that zero emission standard would comply with our rules. So we do think we are well within our authority. That said, we have a similar rule that was adopted last June, 1146.2, which is for large water heaters and small boilers and process heaters. And there is a lawsuit right now pending, just kind of citing the same things that they cited in the Berkeley case. We do feel that we are very much within our regulatory authority to establish NOx limits. Is what we do. So, but just wanted to mention that there is that lawsuit that is pending.
I also want to add that And although we talk a lot about heat pumps, and that's only because heat pump has a big market right now, it's a very feasible solution. And that doesn't mean we are not allowing other technology, for example, fuel cell. And we did meet with the manufacturers about fuel cell, especially residential fuel cell, a Japanese company that came over, met with us and talking about the adoption in Japan. And that they are expecting 3 million residential fuel cell in Japan, supported by the government. And in 2030, I think that's their goal. And we don't have a calculation for fuel cell for our analysis, because that we do not, there's no fuel cell market right now in United States. And however, that company said they are working to get certification and trying to come to United States market. So, and then in the future, if we have more installation data, we are going to add that analysis in our calculation. So first of all, yeah, we're not preclude fuel cell or any other fuel technology.
Yeah, we've even saw like solar water heating. Partially, I think for the multifamily, we saw it in some multifamily structures that were heating their pool with like a solar system. So again, you know, we're technology neutral. We're just establishing a NOx limit, and any technology that can be utilized to meet that limit, it would be acceptable.
Yeah, if I may, Ryan, one additional reply to your question about essentially what's the lawsuit resistance factor for the variety of different building standards that are out there. As we try to decarbonize the existing building stock, right, we can either do gas bans, which Berkeley tried, and I think that the ruling in that case was judicial overreach, but it's there, and our industry decided not to challenge it, basically because we're moving in a different direction. There were numerous standards adopted around the country that focused on some variation of all electric requirement, either all electric required or preferred or all electric ready. But the whole building decarb movement is moving towards building performance standards, which limit greenhouse gases and or other emissions from machinery. And I view these two rules as essentially a very specific and probably very robust implementation of building performance standards. So, and Heather and team, I'd welcome your insights as to whether I'm on or off base about that.
We don't. So what we really do see this as regional air quality, right? That's what our mission is. Our mission is to reduce our regional air quality. So we very much look at this as a NOx emission rule. There's definitely the co-benefits of decarb, which makes it really be in line with so many other efforts around the state, around the country, around the nation, which I think is why we see so much innovation in the heat pump markets. I've worked on regulations before where it's very specific to our South Coast air quality region's air quality, trying to push things lower and setting lower limits, and it just takes so much longer for that technology to really improve and emerge. While we're now working in the same, like kind of in the same vein as the building decarb, we just do see a lot of innovation and a lot of products that are coming onto market, just within the year that we're working on this. So we're very hopeful in this space that the zero emission space and water heating is a really successful, technically feasible, cost-effective solution.
Beautiful, thank you. I've got a couple of more questions written down, but I'm going to keep my mouth shut for a minute and offer the microphone to anyone else. So please raise hands, speak up, drop in chat. Okay, well, here I go then. In some of the public comment, both verbal and written, one group of comments has asserted that you folks in AQMD staff have used unrealistically high coefficient of performance as the basis for your calculations. And they say, no, the COP is really half of what staff is presenting. How would you respond to that criticism?
So the way we do our analysis for this, we actually don't take the coefficient of performance like from devices and all that. So they're assuming from an endpoint of our coefficient of performance, but also the COP that they state is unreasonably low, and our technology has definitely developed over time and definitely higher than what they're stating.
And
Okay,
especially in our region, we just have, if you want to find a place where heat pumps is a great solution, with our climate, heat pumps work very, very well for our region. It's a great efficient solution for lowering emissions. That said, we did a site visit up to our mountain communities because South Coast is a very diverse region. So we do actually have cold climates. And we went up to our cold climates and went with a contractor who showed us around some of the heat pump installations that he has done. So it is feasible even in the colder temperatures. There are units that work very well that can freeze and thaw themselves. So heat pumps, great solution in the nice warm Southern California that we think of, but it's also a great solution in our mountain communities.
I also think
Cool.
they're taking the COP like from our fuel switching costs, but the way we calculate our fuel switching costs is based on estimations from the residential appliance saturation study. So those are empirically found data points rather than taking from an average COP. So just fuel from gas versus from a heat pump.
okay, thank you. Regarding the cold climate, we've got a little under 6 million households or dwelling units, I believe, in the air district territory. How many of those are in what we would call cold climate, above 2,000 or whatever feet, we presume?
Anyone on the team know that off the top of their head?
Yeah, I because I worked on that rule 1111 for high altitude. That's for the cold climate installation before. So by our experience, and we have about every year we have about 400 units being replaced and high altitude in mountain communities. And so we use that number for our analysis. That's actually a very small number compared to all the replacement in our region.
Yeah, so if we assume an average lifespan of 15 years or even let's say 20 years, 20 times 400 would only be 8,000, probably more than that, but it's certainly it's a small fraction. So that's good to know. Thank you. TechClean California has, on your slide, you said now 49,000 heat pump installations split between space heating and water heating. How's the cost of installation data looking there? And are we getting pretty strong central tendency, or are we getting a widespread, a wide standard deviation in that cost data?
That's a great question. We're going to go through lots of that in our working group meeting, 8 slides. We were, we've been getting a lot of questions on our costs and concerns about the cost. We do a lot of regulations at South Coast that hits like large industries. So, the refineries have to take action, the energy generating facilities have to take action. There's a lot of sensitivity because this is going to impact every single one of our residents. So cost is something we take very seriously. We're very lucky to have that tech data because it's real world installation costs. So what we're doing right now is we're updating our costs. We had been using like all of the data, so 2021 through 2023. Now we're just going to take out and look at 2024 just to look at the most updated costs. And I do think that costs, inflation has been an impact, and I think costs are still going up a bit when it comes to that data, but we'll have a pretty good breakdown of the more recent cost compared to like the full cost, like looking just at 2024. I don't know, Jen, if you wanted to talk about anything specific, and I don't know if we have it right now about the cost spread, or if I know we do have some outliers for sure. We also have, some outlying homes. Some homes are very, very large and it's going to cost a lot to heat and cool them.
For sure. Yeah, to put it shortly, there are more installations going through TechLean California over just from 2023 to 2024. So we do have a lot more data points looking at costs for those. As for space heating, the space heating costs have been relatively the same, if not a little bit lower than what we've used previously. And with the water heating, there's been about 3 times more installations in the past year. And we're kind of seeing increased costs with water heating, but that might just be due to more data points or just inflation as well, just a lot of things coupled together.
Yeah, water heating is a little like the heat pump water heaters are a little newer technology. You know, HVAC heat pumps have been around for many, many, many decades. So we do expect the water side on that newer technology to come down over time.
Yeah. Diane, you're muted. There you go.
There you go. Hi. So a question just occurred to me, and I know that AQMD is working at point of use emissions, but is there a partnership, or where is that space we're working with the source of electricity and that chain of emissions, obviously from production, but transportation and power, plants or whatever? Do you all have those partnerships in place? Obviously, there's a lot going on in a lot of different sectors all at the same time, and we're all coming up together. But I'm just curious where you are now with that.
So we have rules that apply to many different sectors, including one for energy generating facilities. So we do establish NOx emission limits on those facilities as well, and those emissions have come down over time. So yeah, when we talk about zero emission space and water, we are talking about the unit itself. So as you said, the point of use, that unit has zero emission limits, but we are also ratcheting down the emission limits on the sources of electricity.
The emission from power plants are pretty low here, and as we mentioned on one slide, it's 2 to 3 tons per day for the entire region from utility companies and generating companies. And then the equipment there, like typical turbine emission limit is very low, must have the lowest emission limit in the nation, and typically 2 to 3 ppm, so very low emission.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. So we're at about 5 minutes left. I want to pause the Q&A here for just a minute and essentially put out an ask for all of us around the state who are green building advocates and knowledgeable on this. If you have some info that could help support this important rulemaking, by all means, please submit a public comment. I will actually drop a link in the chat for where you can submit comment letters, but also myself and a number of others that are on the call are working to drum up support. So if you're a member of a trade association, if your company wants to express support, if you have good relations with the city council member or county supervisor, we're looking for all of those supporters to come out and express that, yes, not only can we afford to implement these rules, we can't afford not to. And the affordability has become a central question. So just looking for all of the people listening to this call to please join in and help. Let's see. I've got another question. See if we have time for this. Another one of the challenges to the rulemaking has been, oh my gosh, this will be incredibly expensive when we look at it in terms of dollars per ton of NOx reduced. I've heard estimates as high as I think $2.5 million per ton. I don't know what your standard range is. I'm new to that part of the game. How would you respond to those criticisms? And is that just because we're getting to the hard part, or how does that stand?
Yeah, we're getting a lot of pushback and, cost estimates, projected cost estimates, that it's that don't seem very fact-based. We're using a lot of real data, real costs from real installations, and based on that data, when it comes to space heating, if you're replacing your HVAC, a conventional HVAC system with a heat pump system, a zero emission system, the costs are actually similar. You might even have some savings, and there's enough rebates out there that it will be very cost effective to swap over on the space side. There's some concerns about installations where if you're just replacing your furnace, so if you don't have an AC and furnace together, everybody knows when you put in an AC system, that's a very expensive endeavor. So there are concerns with installations when there's not ACs. So we're trying to build in some flexibility and some allowances to address those concerns. When it comes to the water heating, it is a little more expensive. There is a higher upfront cost, but again, those incentives, there's so many incentives out there right now. It's a great time to transition over to a heat pump. So what we're just trying to do is just to keep showing those real costs, not the estimated costs that you can always find a very expensive way to do things, but we're looking at actual costs of installations within our jurisdiction and what those costs are. So when our analysis shows there's actually cost savings for space heating, and yes, there's going to be some additional costs when it comes on the water side. And as we mentioned, there's 10 million units that are subject to these rules. So any additional cost, times 10 million is going to be a lot. So finding some pretty good savings on the space, some additional costs on the water, but lots and lots of funding right now. So we have technically feasible solutions that are cost effective.
Also, to add on to that, in the 2022 AQMP, we have a per ton NOx limit, so that is at 325,000, but we inflation adjust that. So our previous analysis was 349,000 tons per NOx, but we're updating that in our next working group meeting.
And so that's just like our threshold. Like we have to show that our projections are technically feasible, and then we have a screening threshold, so an amount. It's kind of a guidance. Like we want to propose rules that are below this certain threshold, and that's based on the cost to do the upgrades versus the tons of NOx that are reduced. So we have that threshold as kind of our board uses that as our decision making. And Jen said it was 349 from the 2022 AQMP, and inflated up. I forgot what number she just said.
It was 325 in the AQMP, but our
325.
previous evaluation of the rules were $2022, so that was 349, but we're updating that to $2024.
So that is what our threshold is, that we try to stay below. And like I said, for 1111, we're well below that and showing cost savings. For 1121, I think on average, it's going to be below that threshold.